Hello. I once believed in second chances. I left behind a life of bloodshed and chaos in Mexico, a decorated member of the 36th Amphibious Special Forces Group, forced into exile when the cartel put a price on my head. I wanted peace, and when I met Patricia, I thought I'd finally found it. She was unlike anyone I'd ever known. Fierce, passionate, and full of life. Her fire burned so brightly that it reignited something in me. A hope I thought I'd lost forever. We married after a whirlwind romance and moved back to my hometown in Baja. It wasn't an easy choice, but after years of hiding in the U.S., I wanted to reclaim what I'd lost. My roots, my identity, my peace. Patricia stood by me, promising we would build a future together. The first 2 years were idyllic, or so I thought. I opened my own auto shop, Taller Lopez, and poured my heart into it. Business thrived. Locals trusted me with their cars, and word spread fast about my honest work. Meanwhile, Patricia charmed the community with her activism and charisma. She painted murals, hosted community events, and brought a spark of energy to our little town. But something started to shift. It was subtle at first. She would roll her eyes when I spoke about the shop, call my dreams small, or complain about how little excitement the town offered. I brushed it off as restlessness. Maybe she was adjusting to a slower pace of life. Then came the late nights. "I'm meeting friends," she'd say, avoiding my eyes as she slipped out the door. When I asked who these friends were, she'd snap, "Do I need to report my every move to you now?" I didn't push her. I wanted to trust her. The breaking point came when I heard the first whispers. She was with Enrique at the cantina. A customer casually mentioned as I worked under the hood of his truck. Looked pretty cozy, if you ask me. My wrench slipped, clattering to the ground. "Patricia? With Enrique Valdez?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah," he said, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "The flamboyant guy with the cars. Guess he's taken a liking to her." I knew the name. Everyone did. Enrique Valdez, known as El Flamboyant, wasn't just a cartel boss. He was a hurricane, tearing through Baja with reckless abandon. Wherever he went, chaos followed. And now, my wife's name was being spoken in the same breath as his. That night, Patricia came home hours later than usual. The scent of a new perfume lingered on her as she brushed past me with a dismissive, "I'm tired. Going to bed." I sat at the kitchen table long after she'd gone, staring at the empty chair across from me. Doubt crept in like a shadow. What was she hiding? Who was she becoming? And most importantly, how far would I go to uncover the truth? The following days felt like walking on shattered glass. Every interaction with Patricia was strained, a tightrope balancing act between pretending things were normal and the gnawing suspicion clawing at me. She grew bolder, more dismissive. "Don't wait up for me," became her nightly mantra, and her phone, once left casually on the counter, was now locked away in her purse or clutched tightly in her hand. I decided to follow her. I wasn't proud of it, but trust wasn't an option anymore. One evening, after she kissed me on the cheek with that hollow affection she'd mastered, I waited 10 minutes before slipping out the door and into my truck. The streets were dark, the hum of distant waves the only sound as I trailed her car. She wasn't heading toward the usual spots, no community centers or art cafes. She drove out of town, taking a winding road toward the hills. My heart pounded as I killed my headlights and slowed my pace. The destination wasn't a surprise. Not after what I'd heard. A sprawling villa loomed in the distance, its lights cutting through the night like a beacon of arrogance. Enrique's compound. Patricia parked outside the gates, stepping out in a red dress that clung to her like sin. My stomach churned. She didn't even hesitate when the guards waved her through, their smirks confirming what I already knew. I stayed parked far enough away to remain unseen, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind raced. This wasn't just an affair. This was danger. You don't get close to someone like Enrique Valdez without consequences. People who crossed him ended up in shallow graves or disappeared entirely. The worst part was the look on her face as she walked through those gates. Radiant, confident, alive. It was the same fire that had drawn me to her, now burning for someone else. When she finally left hours later, I followed her home, parking a block away. I sat in the truck for what felt like forever, trying to decide what to do. Should I confront her? Leave her? Warn her? By the time I stepped inside, she was already in bed, her back turned to me. I stood there for a moment, staring at the outline of her figure beneath the covers. The woman I had built a life with, now a stranger with secrets I could no longer ignore. I slept on the couch that night, if you could call it sleep. The next morning, as she brewed coffee in the kitchen, I broke the silence. "Who were you with last night?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. She didn't even flinch. "Friends," she said, not meeting my gaze. "What friends?" I pressed. Her eyes finally locked onto mine, icy and defiant. "Does it matter?" "It does if it's Enrique Valdez," I said, watching the color drain from her face. She recovered quickly, her lips curling into a smirk. "Are you spying on me now, Gabriel? That's pathetic." "Pathetic?" I stepped closer, my voice rising. "Pathetic is running off to a cartel boss because you're bored with your husband." Her smirk faded, replaced by a cold, detached expression. "You don't understand, Gabriel. He's different. He's powerful. He doesn't settle for mediocrity." The words hit like a knife to the chest. "Then why are you still here?" I asked, my voice cracking despite my efforts to stay composed. Her eyes softened for a fleeting moment, a flicker of guilt I hadn't expected. "Because I thought you'd understand." "Understand what?" I demanded. "That I deserve more than this?" she snapped, gesturing around the room. "This small town, this small life. I thought you wanted the same, but clearly I was wrong." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I nodded, my resolve hardening. "You're right," I said, stepping back. "You deserve more, and you can have it. But not with me." Her eyes widened, but I didn't wait for her response. I grabbed my keys and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. I spent the next day in a haze of anger and despair. The shop was my only refuge, but even the clatter of tools and the hum of engines couldn't drown out the thoughts spiraling in my mind. The betrayal, the lies, it was suffocating. By evening, I made a decision. If Patricia wanted to gamble with her life, fine. But she wasn't going to take mine down with her. I called an old contact, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, someone I thought I'd never need again, Raul. Back when I was in the military, Raul was our intelligence officer, the one who always had a pulse on the cartel's moves. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was him. The line rang twice before his gravelly voice answered. "Gabriel, it's been a long time." "It has," I said, my voice heavy with unspoken words. "What's this about?" he asked, skipping the pleasantries. "I need information," I said, "on Enrique Valdez." There was a pause, and I could hear the faint sound of typing in the background. Raul never stopped working. "Valdez? El Flamboyant?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his tone. "What are you getting yourself into?" "It's personal," I said, not offering more than that. Raul sighed. "He's bad news, Gabriel. Dangerous even by cartel standards. I hope you're not thinking of crossing him." "Just tell me what you know," I insisted. Another pause, then he spoke. "He's got a compound in the hills. Well guarded, but not impenetrable. His operation isn't as strong as he pretends it is. The theatrics, they're a smokescreen. He's made a lot of enemies lately, even within his own ranks. If you're smart, you'll stay out of his way." "Thanks for the advice," I said, already planning my next move. "Gabriel," Raul said, his tone shifting to one of concern. "Don't do anything stupid." "I won't," I lied, ending the call. That night, I returned home to find Patricia sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold and resolute. She glanced at me briefly, her expression unreadable. "About what?" "About Enrique," I said, watching her closely. "And what you're really doing with him." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she shrugged. What do you want me to say, Gabriel? That I like being around someone who doesn't make me feel trapped. Trapped? I repeated, the word stinging like a slap. You think I've trapped you? I gave you everything I had, Patricia. I built this life for us. No, she interrupted, standing up and crossing her arms. You built this life for you. I never wanted this dusty little town or your rundown garage. I wanted more, Gabriel. I still do. More. I snapped. You mean a cartel boss? A man who destroys lives for sport? Her eyes narrowed. At least he's honest about who he is. Can you say the same, Gabriel? Or are you still hiding behind this facade of a quiet mechanic, pretending you're not just as dangerous? Her words hit harder than I cared to admit. She was right in one way. I had hidden my past from her, buried it deep. But unlike Enrique, I had fought to leave that darkness behind. Get out, I said, my voice low and trembling with fury. What? She asked, caught off guard. I said get out, I repeated, stepping closer. You want to play with fire? Fine, go to him. But don't come crying to me when it all burns down around you. She hesitated, her defiance wavering for the first time. You don't mean that. Yes, I do, I said, pointing toward the door. Take your things and go. For a moment I thought she might fight back, might try to stay. But then she grabbed her purse and walked out without another word, slamming the door behind her. As the sound echoed through the house, I stood there in the silence, my chest heaving with anger and heartbreak. This was no longer just a betrayal. It was war. Patricia's departure left the house eerily quiet. But my mind was anything but. I couldn't stop replaying her words, the venom in her tone, the coldness in her eyes. She had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. The next morning I called Raul again. You're still alive, he said dryly. Barely, I replied. I need more than just intel, Raul. I need help. There was a long pause. You're not thinking of taking on Valdez yourself, are you? No, I said, though the thought had crossed my mind. But I want to dismantle him, piece by piece. He's ruined lives, mine included, and it's time someone made him pay. Raul sighed heavily. You know what you're asking, Gabriel. This isn't some old revenge mission. It's suicide. I'm not asking, I said firmly. I'm telling you, if you don't help me, I'll do it alone. Another pause, then he muttered a curse under his breath. Fine, but you follow my lead. No cowboy moves, no getting yourself killed before we make a dent in this guy's operation. Deal, I said. Over the next few days, Raul and I worked in the shadows, gathering intel on Enrique's operations. Raul tapped into his network of informants and corrupt officials, piecing together a map of Valdez's empire. His compound wasn't just a fortress. It was the hub of his entire operation. Drugs, money, weapons, they all flowed through there. But there were cracks in the foundation. His men were loyal only to his money, and his recent paranoia had made him careless. He's scared, Raul said during one of our late-night strategy sessions. He's made too many enemies, and he knows it. That's why he's clinging to Patricia. She's not just a fling. She's a distraction, a way to flaunt his power. If we hit him now, he won't see it coming. I nodded, my jaw clenched. Let's do it. Before we could make our move, I needed to confront Patricia one last time. Not to save her, she had made her bed, but to bait the trap. I knew where she'd be. The cantina where Enrique liked to hold court. It was late, and the place was packed with his men, their laughter and the clinking of glasses echoing through the air. Patricia was there, sitting on Enrique's lap, her red dress shimmering under the dim lights. She looked radiant, alive in a way she hadn't been with me in months. The sight made my stomach churn. As I stepped inside, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to me, and the tension was palpable. Enrique leaned back in his chair, a smug grin spreading across his face. Well, if it isn't the mechanic. Enrique, I said, keeping my voice steady. What brings you here, amigo? He asked, his tone dripping with mockery. Trouble with your car? Or maybe you're here to see Patricia. Patricia stiffened slightly, but she didn't move. Her eyes met mine, a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, crossing her face. I'm here for closure, I said, stepping closer. You've taken everything from me, Enrique. My wife, my peace, my life. But I'm not here to beg. I'm here to warn you. The room erupted in laughter. Enrique's voice the loudest. Warn me? You've got guts, I'll give you that. But what could you possibly do to me? I let the laughter die down before speaking again. You'll find out soon enough. I turned to Patricia, my expression hard. You chose him, Patricia. Remember that when it all falls apart. For a brief moment, something in her eyes softened, as if she realized the weight of what was coming. But then she looked away, her jaw set in defiance. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the cantina, the sound of Enrique's laughter following me into the night. Outside, Raúl was waiting in a car parked across the street. Well? He asked as I climbed in. It's done, I said, my voice cold. Now we wait. Raúl smirked. You're sure about this, Gabriel? Once we start, there's no going back. I stared out at the cantina, its lights glowing like a beacon of everything I'd lost. I'm sure, I said. And with that, the wheels of revenge were set in motion. Raúl's plan was surgical. Hit Enrique's empire where it would hurt the most, his supply lines. Without drugs to move, his money would dry up, and his men would turn on him. It was a slow and deliberate dismantling, and every piece of the operation relied on precision. We started with his warehouse in the outskirts of town, a place Raúl's informants had marked as a major transit hub. Enrique's shipments passed through there before heading to the border. It was heavily guarded, but Raúl and I had an advantage. We knew the guard rotation and the weak points in their security. Under the cover of darkness, we made our move. Raúl's team, a group of ex-military operatives like me, worked with quiet efficiency. The guards were subdued before they even had a chance to sound the alarm. We slipped into the warehouse, our boots crunching softly on the concrete floor. Inside, rows of crates lined the walls, each one packed with drugs worth millions. Raúl gave me a nod, and we set to work. Within minutes, the first explosion shook the ground. The fire spread quickly, consuming everything in its path. By the time Enrique's men realized what was happening, the warehouse was a blazing inferno. The next morning, word spread fast. Enrique's shipment went up in flames, Raúl said, handing me a cup of coffee as we reviewed the aftermath in his safe house. It'll take him weeks to recover from this hit, if not longer. But I wasn't satisfied. It's not enough, I said, my voice tight. I want him to feel it. I want him to know it was me. Raúl raised an eyebrow. Revenge is a dangerous game, Gabriel. You've already won the first round. Don't let your anger make you sloppy. I'm not angry, I lied. Enrique wasn't one to take a hit lying down. Within hours, his men were on high alert, scouring the town for answers. I kept my head down, working at the garage as if nothing had happened. But Patricia was a different story. She came to the shop late that afternoon, her expression a mix of anger and fear. I hadn't seen her since the night at the cantina, and part of me wanted to slam the door in her face. What are you doing, Gabriel? She demanded, stepping into the office. Working, I said coldly, not looking up from the carburetor I was cleaning. Don't play dumb, she snapped, slamming her hand on the desk. I know it was you. Enrique knows it was you. Good, I said, meeting her gaze. Then he knows I'm just getting started. Her face paled, and for a moment, she looked genuinely scared. You don't understand what you're doing. He's dangerous, Gabriel. He'll kill you. Maybe, I said, setting the carburetor down. But not before I destroy him first. Patricia shook her head, her voice breaking. This isn't you. You're not a killer. No, I said, my tone sharp. But he is. And so are the men he works with. If you want to stay by his side, that's your choice. But don't come crying to me when the walls start closing in. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine for something. Maybe the man she thought I used to be. But that man was gone, replaced by someone colder, someone who had nothing left to lose. Without another word, she turned and walked out, leaving the door swinging behind her. Raul called later that night. "He's panicking," he said, his voice laced with satisfaction. "The warehouse was just the beginning. We've intercepted 2 more shipments and hit another safe house. Enrique's men are scattering like rats." "Good," I said, pacing the room. "But there's a problem," Raul added, his tone turning serious. "He's starting to suspect the people around him. Word is, he thinks Patricia tipped us off." I froze. "What?" "It makes sense," Raul said. "She's close to him, and he knows she's connected to you. He'll use her as a scapegoat if it means saving himself." A part of me wanted to say it wasn't my problem, that Patricia had made her bed and now she had to lie in it. But another part, one I couldn't ignore, knew I couldn't let her pay for my revenge. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice heavy. "We wait," Raul said simply. "Enrique's desperation will be his downfall. But keep an eye on her, Gabriel. If he turns on her, she'll need an escape route." I didn't respond, my mind already racing. Patricia had betrayed me, humiliated me, broken my trust. But I wasn't ready to let her die for it. Not yet. The days that followed were a whirlwind of chaos for Enrique and his operation. Raul's network continued to dismantle the cartel piece by piece, targeting Enrique's supply lines, bank accounts, and even his trusted lieutenants. Each strike was precise, calculated to push him closer to the edge. But Enrique wasn't just losing his empire. He was losing his mind. Patricia became a constant topic of whispers among his men. Rumors circulated that she was feeding information to an unknown enemy. Her closeness to me, her husband-turned-adversary, made her a convenient scapegoat. Raul's warning hung heavy in my mind. He'll turn on her when he has no one else to blame. Late one night, I got the call I'd been dreading. "She's in trouble," Raul said, his voice clipped. "What happened?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. "Enrique confronted her," Raul explained. "Accused her of being a rat. My sources say it got ugly. She's still alive, but barely. He's keeping her at the compound under guard." I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, pity, and a flicker of guilt. Patricia had betrayed me. Yet the thought of her suffering at Enrique's hands made my stomach churn. "Let me guess," I said, my voice hard. "You want me to save her?" Raul hesitated. "I'm saying you can, if you want to, but it's your call." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. "When do we move?" The next night, Raul and his team gathered at a safe house just outside Enrique's compound. It was a full-scale operation, and everyone knew the stakes. If Enrique suspected an attack, the compound would become a slaughterhouse. Raul laid out the plan on a map, pointing to the weakest points in Enrique's defenses. "We hit fast, in and out. Priority 1 is retrieving Patricia. Anything else is collateral." I nodded, my jaw clenched. "And Gabriel," Raul added, his tone serious. "This isn't about revenge anymore. If we do this, we do it clean. No mes, no personal vendettas." I didn't respond. The assault began just after midnight. Under the cover of darkness, Raul's team breached the compound's perimeter. The guards, already rattled by weeks of attacks, were no match for the precision of Raul's men. Silencers whispered in the night as we moved through the compound like shadows. My heart pounded as we approached the main building. Patricia was being held in a room on the second floor, guarded by 2 of Enrique's men. Raul signaled to me and we moved in. The guards didn't stand a chance. Within seconds, they were on the ground, unconscious. I pushed open the door, my breath catching at the sight before me. Patricia was slumped in a chair, her wrists bound, her face bruised and swollen. She looked up weakly as the door opened, her eyes widening in shock when she saw me. "Gabriel?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't answer. Instead, I moved to her side, cutting the ropes that bound her wrists. She winced as I helped her to her feet, leaning heavily on me for support. "We need to go," I said, my voice cold. Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face. As we made our way out of the compound, gunfire erupted in the distance. Enrique's men had finally realized what was happening. Raul's team held them off, buying us precious time to escape. When we reached the extraction point, Raul was waiting with a grim expression. "Enrique's still in there," he said. "We didn't get him." "That's fine," I said, helping Patricia into the car. "This isn't over yet." Raul raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Back at the safe house, Patricia sat on the couch, her hands trembling as she cradled a cup of water. "Why did you come for me?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Don't read too much into it," I said, leaning against the wall. "I didn't do it for you." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Enrique's going to come after you," she said quietly. "Let him," I replied, my voice steely. "I'm counting on it." Patricia didn't respond, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. This wasn't just a rescue. It was bait, and Enrique had no idea what was waiting for him. The morning after the rescue, the safe house buzzed with activity. Raul's team prepared for the inevitable retaliation. Enrique wouldn't let the attack on his compound go unanswered, and we were counting on it. Patricia, still shaken, remained on the couch, her eyes darting nervously as the plans unfolded around her. I hadn't spoken to her much since we brought her back, and I wasn't about to start now. Raul approached me as I checked my gear. "He'll come after her first," Raul said, nodding toward Patricia. "She's the perfect target. Weak, vulnerable, and a loose end he'll want to tie up. Let him try," I said, my voice cold. "This time we'll be ready." Raul gave me a measured look. "And when he comes, what then?" I didn't answer. My silence said it all. We didn't have to wait long. By midday, one of Raul's informants reported that Enrique was mobilizing. A convoy of black SUVs was heading toward the town, and it didn't take a genius to figure out where they were going. "He's coming," Raul said, a grim smile on his face. "Good," I replied, strapping on a bulletproof vest. The safe house wasn't just a hideout, it was a fortress, chosen specifically for its defensibility. Reinforced walls, limited access points, and plenty of cover. If Enrique thought he was walking into an easy victory, he was in for a rude awakening. The first shot rang out just after sunset. Raul's team had set up ambush points around the perimeter, and the convoy was immediately met with a hail of bullets. The sound of gunfire echoed through the night as Enrique's men scrambled for cover, their arrogance giving way to panic. Inside the safe house, Patricia huddled in a corner, her hands pressed over her ears. I stood near the front entrance, my rifle trained on the chaos outside. "Stay here," I said without looking at her. She didn't respond, but I could feel her eyes on me. Enrique's men were relentless, but so were we. The firefight raged on, and it wasn't long before the SUVs were little more than smoking wrecks. "Move in," Raul barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. We pushed forward, taking out the remaining guards with precision. The air was thick with smoke and the metallic scent of blood as we advanced on the convoy's lead vehicle. Enrique was there, crouched behind the open door of his SUV, his once confident demeanor replaced with desperation. I stepped forward, my rifle trained on him. "It's over, Enrique," I said, my voice steady. He laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "You think you've won?" He spat, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Neither do you," I replied, taking another step closer. Before Enrique could respond, Patricia appeared at my side, her face pale but determined. "Gabriel," she said softly, her voice trembling.
"Ich glänzt briefly."
"What are you doing here? I told you to stay inside." She ignored my question, her gaze fixed on Enrique. "You deserve this," she said, her voice cold. "Everything that's happened, it's all on you." Enrique sneered. "And you're any better? Running to your husband after you turned on me?" Patricia flinched but held her ground. "I made a mistake," she said quietly, "but I'm not going to let you destroy what's left of my life." Her words surprised me. For the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of the woman I had fallen in love with. Enrique's bravado faltered as Raúl's men surrounded him, their weapons trained on his chest. "Finish it," Raúl said, his voice cold and unyielding. For a moment I hesitated. Killing Enrique here and now would be easy, but it wasn't enough. "I have a better idea," I said, lowering my rifle. Raúl raised an eyebrow. "Care to share?" "We turn him over," I said, a grim smile spreading across my face. "To the people he's wronged. Let them deal with him." Enrique's face paled. "You can't do that," he said, his voice cracking. "Oh, I can," I replied. The decision was made. Enrique was bound and gagged, loaded into one of the surviving vehicles. Raúl's contacts arranged for his delivery to a rival cartel, one with more than enough reasons to make him suffer. As we watched the car disappear into the night, I felt a strange sense of closure. Enrique was finished, and so was his hold on my life. Back at the safe house, Patricia tried to speak to me, but I stopped her with a raised hand. "I don't want to hear it," I said, my voice cold. "Whatever you have to say, it's too late." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. "What will you do now?" she asked quietly. I looked at her for a long moment, the weight of everything we'd been through hanging heavy in the air. "Start over," I said simply, and with that I walked away, leaving Patricia and the wreckage of our lives behind. The days after Enrique's capture were strangely quiet. The chaos that had consumed my life was gone, replaced by an uneasy calm. Raúl and his men packed up and moved on to their next mission, leaving me to face the aftermath alone. Patricia stayed in the safe house for a while, her presence a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. She didn't speak much, and when she did, her words were cautious, like she was afraid of breaking what little remained between us. But the truth was, there was nothing left to break. One evening, as I sat on the porch of the safe house, Patricia joined me. She looked different, tired, broken in a way that even her defiance couldn't mask. "Gabriel," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't respond, staring out at the horizon. "I know you hate me," she continued, "and I deserve it. But I need you to understand, I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Her words stirred something in me, but it wasn't forgiveness. "You didn't mean to betray me?" I asked, my voice bitter. "You didn't mean to climb into bed with a cartel boss and put both our lives in danger?" Patricia flinched, but I didn't stop. "You made your choices, Patricia," I said coldly, "and you knew exactly what you were doing." "I was lost," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was angry, and I didn't know how to fix us." "Fix us?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You didn't try to fix anything. You ran. And now you want what? My pity? My forgiveness?" "I don't want anything," she said, her voice cracking. I wanted you to know I'm sorry." For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of her words hanging between us. "You can stay here until it's safe," I said finally. "But after that, we're done. You go your way and I'll go mine." She nodded, her shoulders sagging as if a heavy burden had finally been lifted. The next morning, Patricia packed her things and left without saying goodbye. I watched her go from the window, a strange mix of relief and sadness washing over me. She had been a part of my life for so long that even after everything, her absence felt like a wound I wasn't sure how to heal. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't start over until she was out of my life for good. That night, I returned to my empty house. The silence was deafening, but it was better than the lies and betrayal that had filled it before. I poured myself a drink and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall as the memories of the past few weeks played out in my mind. Enrique was gone, Patricia was gone, and I was finally free. But freedom came at a price, and I wasn't sure if I was willing to pay it. The man I had been, the man who believed in love, trust, and second chances, was gone. In his place was someone colder, someone harder, someone who had learned the hard way that trusting the wrong person could destroy you. As I drained the last of my drink, a single thought echoed in my mind. The storm was over, but the scars would never fade. And that, I realized, was the real price of betrayal. Returning home felt hollow. The house was the same, but it felt haunted by memories. Good ones that now felt like cruel reminders of how far we'd fallen. I cleaned out Patricia's things the day after she left. Clothes, books, photographs. All of it went into boxes. I set them by the door, ready to donate or throw away. As I worked, I found a framed photo of us from our wedding day. Her smile was so radiant, so genuine. It made my chest ache. I stared at it for a long time before smashing the frame against the wall. Some things weren't worth keeping. By the end of the day, the house was empty of her. But I wasn't sure if it would ever feel like mine again. 2 days after Patricia left, Raul called. "You sitting down?" he asked, his tone grave. "What's wrong?" I asked. "They found Enrique," Raul said. "Or what was left of him." He explained that Enrique's body had been discovered outside the compound of a rival cartel. Tortured, dismembered, and left as a warning. "This sends a message," Raul said. "But it also leaves a vacuum. Someone will take his place." I nodded, though the news brought no satisfaction. Enrique was gone, but his death wasn't closure. The damage he caused still lingered, in my life, in Patricia's, and in the town. Revenge had been served, but it hadn't healed anything. Returning to daily life wasn't easy. The town knew about Patricia's affair. Whispers followed me everywhere I went. Sympathy mixed with judgment. "She's gone, right?" an old customer asked one day while I worked on his truck. "Yeah," I replied curtly, not meeting his eyes. "Good riddance," he muttered. I forced a tight smile and kept working. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, but none of them knew the full story. I wasn't just grieving a marriage. I was piecing together what was left of my life. Each day, I kept my head down and focused on the shop. Work was all I had now. One evening, as I was closing the shop, a familiar figure appeared at the door. It was Patricia. She looked different. Tired, unsure, and hesitant in a way I'd never seen before. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice sharp. "I came to say goodbye," she said softly. "For real this time." I crossed my arms, staring at her. "You already left. What else is there to say?" Her eyes filled with tears. I wanted you to know I'm going back to the US. I need a fresh start." I nodded, unmoved. "You should have thought about that before you burned everything down." She flinched but didn't argue. "Take care, Gabriel," she said quietly, turning to leave. I didn't stop her. This time, I let her go without a second thought. Weeks passed after Patricia's final goodbye. The shop kept me busy, but the emptiness in my life was undeniable. At night, I'd sit on the porch with a beer, staring at the horizon. Memories of Patricia lingered, but the anger had dulled, replaced by a weary acceptance. Raul called occasionally, checking in, but I knew he was trying to pull me back into his world. I refused each time. "I'm done with that life," I told him. "You sure?" he'd ask. "Yes," I'd reply, though the weight of what I'd endured said otherwise. The pieces of my life weren't fitting back together, but I was learning to live with the gaps. One afternoon, Raul showed up at the shop unannounced. "Got something for you," he said, handing me a folder. "What is this?" I asked, flipping it open. "Property," he said. "It's the garage Enrique used to run his operations. It's yours now. Call it a thank you gift for helping us take him down." I stared at the papers. The place was massive, more than I could ever use. "I don't want his blood money," I said, pushing it back. Raul chuckled. "It's not money, it's opportunity. You've got skills, Gabriel. Build something bigger." For the first time in weeks, I felt the faint spark of ambition. Maybe this was how I'd rebuild. The garage Enrique once used for his empire now bore a new name. Taller Nueva Vida, New Life Garage. It wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of survival. With Raul's help, I expanded, hiring a small crew and turning it into the most trusted auto shop in the region. The townspeople, wary at first, came to respect me not just for my work but for standing strong in the face of everything I'd endured. At night, when the shop was quiet, I'd sit by the sign, looking at the stars. Patricia was gone. Enrique was a memory, and the wounds they left were healing, slowly but surely. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I was ready to face it. Alone but stronger. Bye-bye.